Dabo clearly needs a hug. Poor Dabo. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we all love. Best discussion, debate, and analysis of college football. Please lock it in. I rarely comment on other people's comments, meaning players and coaches, but when it gets to this point, this clearly needs to be addressed because Dabo Swinney has made it an issue for absolutely no reason. So first I will state that I have the utmost respect for Dabo Swinney and what he has built at Clemson from a football standpoint and from a culture standpoint. I don't have to go through the accolades concerning his coaching prowess and how that's translated on the field to win after win after win after win after championship after championship after championship in the ACC and then nationally. The record speaks for itself. He has arguably the best football program in the country. So I have tremendous respect for what he has done in Clemson since 2009. In addition to that, by all measurements, by all indications that I know of, Dabo Swinney is a tremendous person. He has been a great role model to those individuals on his team. He cares for them. He loves them. He respects them. He does his very best to do things the right way. He is a Christian man who has lived up to that standard, not to perfection. There is no such thing, but he's a solid man that promotes and exudes strong character, ethics, values. I have tremendous respect for Dabo Swinney. Concerning these comments, though, after the South Carolina win, this is a bit over the top. He has been whining all season about the so-called disrespect his football team is receiving. I don't know where this is coming from. He needs to be a little bit more specific and point out who is disrespecting his team. Should they automatically be placed number one because they won a national championship in another season? Why? That is the stupidest argument I've ever heard. But let's get to Dabo Swinney's comments first, and then I'll try to interpret what he's trying to deliver here, what he's possibly talking about, because none of it makes any sense, and it just doesn't represent himself very well here. So he says after they beat South Carolina, today's win is huge from a national standpoint. Okay, it's a big win because it's a rivalry. It's for the Palmetto State. South Carolina not long ago beat Dabo 5 consecutive years when South Carolina was the superior program. And, of course, Clemson has turned that around rather quickly, and South Carolina has certainly helped out. So from a program standpoint, just like Oregon beating Oregon State is not a big deal nationally, but within the rivalry, it's always a big deal. I could agree with him if he said, this is a big deal. This is a statement win. This is a huge deal because it's a rivalry. But from a national standpoint, okay, this is where he starts to connect the dots. And I get his point, but his point is useless. So he says today's win's a huge national win. Because obviously, if we lose this game, they are going to kick us out, meaning the selection committee, because they're the only ones who really count. So he's got to be talking about the selection committee. He doesn't know that. They don't want us in there anyway. How he has any indication of that, I have no idea. His team is ranked third in the country. They are clearly the third team in regards to matching the record against the resume, the level of dominance against the schedule. How he could possibly in any way defend his team being ranked first or second above either Ohio State or LSU would be a joke, is a joke. I'm not saying that Clemson is not better than Ohio State or LSU, but against its schedule, There is no way that that can be argued. They should not be ranked 1 or 2. They are appropriately ranked by myself and others, and most importantly, the one that counts, the selection committee. They are ranked number 3, as they should be. We would drop to 20, you know. Why does he say that? They would drop to 6 or 7 because they haven't beaten anyone, and they would have lost to South Carolina, a team that was 4-8. And yes, we know what other team lost to South Carolina that has an 11-game resume other than the South Carolina game that is miles beyond Clemson. He, of course, points out Georgia by name. Georgia loses to this very same team, and the next day it's, how do we keep Georgia in it? I don't know where Georgia fell to. If somebody could help me out on this, they fell to 6 or 7, I think, after they lost to South Carolina. We win against the team that beats South Carolina. We win against the team that beats South Carolina. He must be talking about North Carolina. And it's how we get Clemson out. It's the dadgummest thing. We don't have a choice. We got to go 30-0 because we don't play nobody. Well, they don't play anybody. It's not their fault. I've stated that many times. It's not Clemson's fault that they play in the worst conference in the Power 5 and that they scheduled one. Let's not give them too much credit. I've given them all sorts of credit for scheduling Auburn and Texas A&M and going back close to a decade playing Georgia. Those are solid non-conference games, especially since they also play South Carolina. So I have always credited Clemson and other teams like Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech that play a Power 5 opponent within a rivalry and then also play another Power 5, significant Power 5 game. So for Clemson this year, South Carolina and Texas A&M. They can't help it that Texas A&M fell on their face at 7-5 and looked bad against the best teams, and that South Carolina was an embarrassment at 4-8. They can't help that. I understand that. But we live in a college football world that is not objective. We have to make an evaluation, and that evaluation is based on the schedule. It has to be. It has to be based on the schedule. Otherwise, UCF would have been in the playoff the last 2 years. Why was UCF not in the playoff? If we take Dabo Swinney's argument and apply it to anybody else, UCF, Memphis this year, let's put all those teams in the playoff. If there's anybody who's been disrespected, it's been Baylor. And they play a crappy non-conference schedule. They can't be defended. But within the Big 12, they've won all the games. They lost to Oklahoma by 3 points. And that actually gained them some respect. But Baylor's beaten better teams than Clemson, and they're way back at 13 before this next rankings comes out on Tuesday. So if anybody's been disrespected, it was Baylor, and it was Minnesota before they beat Penn State. There are other teams that have been disrespected far more than Clemson. And when he brings up 30-0, he should know better than that. It's not the heavyweight title. It's not a defending championship. That championship was won. It doesn't have to be defended. It can't be lost. If you're going to hang your hat on and claim 30 consecutive wins and that should be counted toward what's going on right now, then that means you can lose that championship as well. We could take that away from you. If you want it to count towards something else, then we should be able to take it away from you as well. No, the 2018 season's over. Those players are gone, many of them. There is more credibility in talking about what happened in the NFL last season because the rosters are more continuous from one season to another in the NFL. So why don't we just put the Los Angeles Rams back in the Super Bowl this year despite being 6-6 because they went to the Super Bowl last year and their rosters more the same this year than the Clemson schedule or the Clemson roster from 2018 to 19. No, that's always a stupid argument, placing teams in spots based on what happened last year. We don't have a choice. We got to go 30-0 because we don't play nobody. Okay, again, last season has nothing to do with this season. There is nobody that has been more consistent than us. Okay, again, does he want to talk about this year or last year? And what does last year and years ago have to do with this year? Nothing. Should have nothing to do with it. If he was on the other side of the fence, he would be arguing the same. He is fitting the argument to his narrative that helps his program. If they played the tough schedule in the tough league, he would definitely be pointing at the other teams in the other leagues that don't play a tough schedule. I guarantee it. So he says here, there's nobody that has been more consistent than us. Sure. If we're giving a lifetime achievement award or something, we have been unbelievably consistent. We have dominated 11 of 12 games. But again, our league doesn't get the credit. Well, Ohio State's dominated 12 of 12 games against better opponents. Our league doesn't get the credit because the league's awful. Maybe we need some of them ACC guys on those big network shows. All I can tell you is we are 10-1 versus the SEC in our last 11. Those games are history. They're 2-0 against the SEC, and they're 2-0 against two teams that are 11-13. So, fine, you won the games, and you dominated to a certain extent against Texas A&M at home, and you definitely dominated South Carolina. And we've won 115 games this decade. What that has to do with anything, I have absolutely no idea. It has to do with nothing that he's stating. He starts with this season talking about a comparison with Georgia and their two results against South Carolina, and then he broadens it out. You know, if we're going to go with this kind of thinking, why don't we start bringing Nebraska and Penn State and USC into the playoff? Why don't we get them involved? They've accomplished a lot more than Clemson has. Bring them into the playoff. So have Alabama and Ohio State, and we've played both of them. Okay, so everybody's won 115 games this decade. Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson have been the three best programs this decade. Great. I will give all due credit to Clemson for being one of the three best programs of the decade. If we want to rank best programs of the decade, Clemson has an argument to be number one. I would place them two. Our program is what people don't focus on. Okay. Then he starts talking about the ACC, and he better be careful here. He really doesn't want to go this. Dabo, stick with your own program and your own team when defending your place in college football and in the rankings, because that is the best argument you can make. You've controlled your games aside from one, and you have done your best to legitimize your season. Virginia would be 9-3 in any league. Well, we can't in any way prove that. I would argue that Virginia in no way. Let's put Virginia in the Big Ten East or the SEC West. Are they going 9-3? No. Generally, the same team last year lost to Indiana. Virginia Tech would be 8-4 in any league. Again, no. Wake Forest, the same thing. No. There's a lot of good football teams in this league. People just don't pay attention. Oh, people are paying plenty of attention to the ACC. And again, those are, when you say good teams, what are we talking about? Are we talking about top 10 or 15 teams? No, none of those three teams are anywhere close to that. They are not the Wisconsins and Michigans and Penn States of the ACC. Those are good teams. Those are teams that are legitimate top 10 to 15 teams in college football. Look at the Big Ten: Minnesota, Penn State, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa. Those are five teams in addition to the Clemson of the Big Ten, Ohio State, that are legitimate teams. The ACC has none of those teams. If you want to say a good team is a team that goes top 40, 45 in the nation? Sure, these are good teams. They're decent teams. The team that was arguably going into yesterday, the second best team in the ACC, Louisville, lost to Kentucky 45-13 to Kentucky. Okay. There's a lot of good teams in this league. People just don't pay attention. It's not my job to build a good league. So, whoa, Dabo, is it a good league, or it's not your job to build a good league? Because basically what you're starting to tell us is it's not a good league and it's not my job or responsibility. And of course it's not. It's my job to build a good program. And you've done that. An amazing program. And I think we've done a nice of that for a long time. Y'all are getting some good footage today. Okay. Oh man, I love Dabo Swinney, but man, just play the games. You're fine. Just win the games. And yes, you would be in jeopardy if you lost, especially now this ACC championship game. But if you would have lost another game, you didn't lose. You're fine. Is it that much of a tragedy or hardship that you're going to be a 3 seed? Dabo, you're not the underdog anymore. Nobody thinks you're an underdog. You shouldn't play the underdog role. Maybe that's what helped you, in a sense, get to the mountaintop, but you can't do it anymore because you're not that team. You're not that program. You're not Clemson 2012 looking up at Florida State in 13 and 14, getting beaten down by Florida State, but coming up. You're not that program anymore. You're a giant. You're not being disrespected. You're being appropriately ranked. Would love to hear your comments about what Dabo Swinney had to say and my response. Please like, comment, share the videos, and subscribe right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.